Regular meeting of the Lincoln-Lancaster County Planning Commission meeting of March 14th, 2018. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available at the front of the chambers with the clerk. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. If you parked in the parking garage across the street to the north, please be sure to pick up a parking coupon on your way out for free parking. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, the commissioners and the staff, cellular phone usage is not permitted in these chambers during any portion of this meeting. We will appreciate your cooperation. And please note that the Planning Commission action is final on the following agenda items. Item number 1.2, pre-existing special permit number 33B. Item number 1.3, special permit number 18005. Item number 4.1B, special permit number 18007. Item number 4.2, special permit number 18002. And item number 5.1, county preliminary plat number 18001. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held February 28th, 2018. Is there a motion?
So moved. Finnegan.
Second, Beckius.
Please call the roll.
Okay, Beckius,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Finnegan,
Yes.
Hove,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Washington,
Abstain.
Core,
Yes.
and Shear.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Jerry to read all of the items on the consent agenda into the record. Once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Jerry, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
Thank you. Item 1.1 is comprehensive plan conformance number 18006 to review as to conformance with the 2040 Lincoln-Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan, a request to declare city-owned property as surplus on property generally located at 22nd and Capitol Parkway. Item 1.1B is change of zone 18004 to rezone surplus property from P Public Use District to B4 Lincoln Center Business District on property generally located at 22nd and Capitol Parkway. Item 1.2 is pre-existing special permit number 33B to allow for the sale of alcohol for consumption off the premises on property generally located at 1101 West Bond. And item 1.3 is special permit 18005 to extend the back section of an existing house by 2 feet on property generally located at 2900 F Street. I would note again that the item 1.2 and item 1.3 are both final action unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these agenda items?
I see none.
Is there anyone here wishing to testify on any of these agenda items? If so, please stand and state that item.
I think we're ready for a motion.
Move approval, Hove.
Second, Edgerton.
Please call the roll.
Sir, was there an item that you wanted to speak on? I'm looking at, was there an item that you wanted to speak on?
1.2,
I don't think so.
which is later in the agenda, I understand.
I thought it appeared as though he was.
Gotcha.
Good check.
Good.
No, okay, all right.
Okay.
Okay, this is approving the consent agenda. I have Hove moving and seconded by Edgerton.
Correct.
Okay. Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0.
There are no requests for deferral, so we will now proceed to public hearings. The staff will make a brief presentation. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. Each person testifying should state their name and address, and shall have 5 minutes to speak unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes, then you will have 1 minute to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the commission votes to defer action or continue the public hearing. Jerry, please call the first public hearing item.
Mr. Chair, try to get up here quickly.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just informed here a few minutes ago, I do have a request for deferral.
Okay,
Preliminary plat 18001. It's item 5.1 on your agenda.
got it.
Mr. Hunsaker is here requesting the deferral if you have any questions for him. Was that a 2-week deferral?
Okay. So Jerry, can you run us through,
We need a motion
yes?
to defer.
So moved, Hove. Second, Beckius.
Okay, ready to vote? Please call the roll.
Okay, Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Okay, that was for a 2-week deferral to the March 28th hearing for the preliminary plat 18001. Okay.
Is there anyone here wanting to speak on that? We need to ask
It
them.
might be here anyway.
Is there anyone here that would like to speak on that item that was just deferred? Preliminary plat 18001? Seeing none?
Okay. Should I read through the testimony parameters again?
I think we're
We're
good.
okay?
I think we're good. I'll go ahead and call the first public hearing item, which is actually, there's 2 items, they're associated items. Item 4.1A is change of zone 18003 from R2 Residential District to H3 Highway Commercial District. Property generally located at 340 West Cornhusker Highway. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval. And the associated special permit 18007 to allow for the sale of alcohol for consumption on the premises located at 340 West Cornhusker Highway. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval, and this is final action on this special permit unless appealed to the city council.
Thomas has a comment.
Mr. Will, was that gentleman here to testify on 1.2?
That was the one that was approved, 1.2.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the
Gentleman that you
consent-
talked
in the
to.
That was
consent
the
agenda.
applicant.
Okay,
For
beautiful,
1.2.
beautiful, okay.
He just
Thank you.
misunderstood.
Sorry.
Yep.
I think I misunderstood. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
no problem.
Ready to go with Brian?
Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
I see none.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Brian Will, Planning Department. As was noted, these are 2 related applications, and maybe I'll start with the first one that brings about the need for the second one, and that is the special permit for on-sale alcohol. And I think probably a lot of folks here today are familiar with the site of the Royal Grove, 340 West Cornhusker Highway. This is Cornhusker Highway here, Northwest 4th here. And we're essentially talking about 2 pieces of the puzzle here. One is the southern part where the building itself is located and some of the parking, and then the north half of the property, which is occupied fully by a parking lot. And so the special permit for on-sale alcohol is necessary in order to resume operations. So I've been asked the question a lot by several people, well, why is that? They've been there forever, and it's true. The Royal Grove has been there since I want to say, I think about 1967, and pretty much, the configuration we see here. The issue, though, is that it ceased operation 4 years ago. And so what we would have said is that up to that point when it ceased operation, it was a non-conforming use and could continue to operate in its present configuration. However, at the point where it ceased operating 4 years ago, it had 2 years in which to restart, take advantage of that non-conforming status, and that did not happen. Now someone is coming forward and wants to reuse the building and have on-sale alcohol, and so that's why we're here talking about this today. And so the special permit, recall, the big issue with those permits are the separation criteria, and recall, a part of that is a 100-foot separation from a first floor residence or residential zoning district. And so the issue here, and I'll try to show that, is actually the zoning pattern here. This white line here delineates between the H3, the highway, commercial zoning along Cornhusker Highway, where the south half of the property is zoned H3 commercial zoning. This line here coming in, and then actually matching that, delineates then the residential R2 zoning to the north, and actually to the northwest there is R6 zoning. And so the problem is then today when we apply those, the separation standards to this building for the special permit, it fails. It doesn't meet the required separation. And so one solution was, and that's what's been brought forward by the applicant, is to rezone actually their parking lot, and that's the other application we're talking about. So this area here, to rezone it to H3, so from R2 to H3. Doing that then, the facility, the licensed premises, which would be that building, then meets the separation criteria, all the other requirements for the special permit. There's one exception I'd note, and that is listed in the conditions. It's this outdoor area that I suppose has been used for beer garden, outdoor smoking, I'm not sure which. This area, however, is too close to the R6 to the northwest. It's less than 100 feet. And so the way the special permit is written, we are recommending approval. The building proper meets all the requirements. That outdoor area, at least all of it, doesn't. And so we're suggesting that that would be removed, not be indicated as part of the licensed premises. So this special permit, if the associated change of zone then for the parking lot, the north half of the property, is approved, meets all the requirements. So it does have conditional approval, meets all the requirements, provided the change of zone is also approved. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Brian?
How did this lot end up being split zoning like this? Because I understand it's one lot, and we don't normally do split zoning, so was it maybe not one lot originally?
Yeah, no, actually, it's not one lot. It's actually about 28 platted lots. It's an old residentially platted lot. This sort of zoning pattern along Cornhusker Highway, actually along a lot of the older arterial streets, is not uncommon, where one half the block is commercial, the other half is residential. And that zoning pattern has been here for a long time, long enough, in fact, that there is a special permit actually for that parking lot in the residential zoning district. So it was not uncommon. The commercial stuff right on the highway or right on the road, commercial zoning, the remainder of the block residential. So that's the history here.
And Brian, I think you mentioned in the in your information that you presented to us that the that this information was contingent upon an agreement that it stay at its current use. Is that correct, as a parking lot?
Right, yeah, Ashley, thank you. Yes, with the change of zone, We are recommending that that be a conditional change of zone, subject to the owner entering into a zoning agreement with the city. And the limitation there is that the uses be limited to a singular use, the one that's there now, a parking lot. So the change of zone for the north half from H3 to R2, recommended approval, subject to that agreement that limits that use to what's there today. So any change in that would require coming back a change of zone application to modify that zoning agreement.
Okay, thank you.
And would that change, could a future change of zone request happen with the current owner? Or would it only happen once the property had changed ownership and the next owner said, I mean, the next owner isn't going to get this agreement, right? The agreement is only with the current owner.
No, that's gonna run with the land.
It's going to run with the land. For how long is the agreement? When can the agreement be modified?
That'd be up to city council. It's gonna be approved. If it's approved, that approval falls to city council. It would be city council's authority to modify it.
Brian, I was trying to look through some of the history here, and I couldn't pull up the parking permit from 67, parking use permit. But going back to Tracy's question a little bit, is there a reason why this has never been zoned in the subsequent years that it potentially could have been?
Well, I think it's been used as a parking lot to serve the Royal Grove. They had what they needed. Really, there's no cause to change the zoning. They weren't trying to expand the building into it, so parking is allowed in residential zoning by special permit. They had what they needed.
Brian, is there anything that we're doing with this action that could, in the future, affect things like we've seen along Cornhusker Highway and other places, like entryway landscape or at the east end of Cornhusker Highway, we got into the car dealership stuff. I know that this part of Cornhusker Highway has been landscaped already. Anything with additional kind of setback or anything that we might be missing here in terms of?
Well, not that I know of. The other thing is yes, by approving these two, you allow the existing use to continue, meaning
Right.
presumably it's not going to redevelop or something like that. But with these special permits, there's really no nexus to cause there to be any real significant upgrade to the property,
Okay.
screening, right-of-way, otherwise, yeah. So, no, I think the answer to that is no. We viewed this as the result of these essentially is there's no real change. That existing use that's been there for almost 50 years can continue.
Okay.
But you are suggesting some landscaping changes on the side of the parking lot.
Yes, well, two things. One, the north edge, what we're saying is, and there's significant landscaping there now.
Right.
Let's just add a note, sort of quantify it and make sure that it's preserved and isn't allowed to go away. Yeah, we noted that there's nothing here, and so we did add to that. Today, if you came through with a special permit, you would have to screen that. And so we're suggesting that standard be applied to it. But otherwise, there's not any other changes.
Got it. Thank you.
I'm going to touch on that just a little bit. When I was reading the report, they were talking about a gate in the fence that needed to be removed. Can you show me where that's at, please?
The gate is somewhere up in here, and it allows pedestrians to come from Saunders through that fence, through the parking lot.
And so there's already mature landscaping there,
Oh, yes.
no curb cut.
No, there's no driveway access
Okay.
there. Just a gate where presumably, maybe makes it easier to park along
Sure.
Saunders, I suppose, and go there.
The record doesn't show that anyone sent in letters or comments, email or by mail? And I'm curious, were there any phone calls? Have we heard from any of the neighbors?
I had 2 phone calls. One was more than anything, I just think curious why these applications were coming forward. The other one, again, was curious about what these applications meant, and I guess if I characterized it, he was complaining, or his complaint was regarding, noise on weekends from the facility.
And that was an existing neighbor?
He said he lived about 2 blocks away.
So Brian, if this had not discontinued, they could have kept their liquor license and
Yes.
turned it over, but
Had
the
the-
discontinuation is what caused.
Yes, yeah. 4 years ago, had somebody else moved in, whatever, converted that, somebody carried on the use, then yeah, it would still be going today. But by virtue of that fact that it ceased, you only have 2 years in which to start it back up.
Okay.
Anything else from Brian? Okay, thank you. You have testimony from the applicant?
Good afternoon, Chairman, Chair, members of the commission. My name is Bill Austin with the law firm of Lake Austin Law, 301 South 13th Street, Suite 100, Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm here today representing Hunky Dory, doing business as the Royal Grove. And with me is Eli Marduk, a representative of Hunky Dory. If you want to give me your address.
Sure. My name is Eli Marduk. My address is 1521 Sunset Road in Lincoln, Nebraska.
I think Mr. Will has pretty much outlined our dilemma. This has been the venue of a tavern nightclub since 1960s, and it has been operated pretty much in the same fashion throughout those years, with the exception, unfortunately, of the 4-year gap that caused it to lose the non-conforming status that it previously had. So the problem there was that with the passage of 2763-680, that instituted a special permit requirement and a 100-foot setback from a residential zone, Hunky Dory found that by virtue of being too close to its own property, it needs a special permit and a change of zone to take care of that. The Hunky Dory is agreeable to all of the conditions that have been put on the special permit, and is also in the process of getting the owner of the property to sign the conditional zoning agreement. The property is held by the Tommy Gelsman Trust, and Hunky Dory is the lessee. The one thing that I thought maybe I might want to, well, a couple things. Hunky Dory did reach out to the neighbors, tried to make a canvass of the neighborhood, did speak with one of them. Most of them weren't at home, but left flyers to try to indicate that there is no change of the essential use of this property. But I did want to emphasize that there is going to be a significant change in that, as I told Eli, Royal Grove conjures up a certain image in the minds of some of us who are a little bit older in Lincoln. This is going to be a much different operation of the Royal Grove than what had been previously experienced there. And I'd just like to have Eli briefly tell you what their plan is. Eli is the former operator of the Vega in the Haymarket.
That's right. My name is Eli Marduk. I'm a professional musician. I also run music venues. I'm currently signed to Warner Brothers Records, and we're excited to kind of bring a new era to the Royal Grove. In the past, I think the Royal Grove had two kind of reputation as a great nightclub, and at one time was considered one of the best music venues in the Midwest, but at the same time also had somewhat of a roadhouse reputation as well. I know there were some fights, stuff like that, and amateur strip nights, stuff like that. Our plan really is to bring high-quality acts to Lincoln, Nebraska, things that the city of Lincoln would be proud to have here, and I hope to use my contacts internationally to bring a lot of great artists here. And this room has a lot of great history. It's the largest club in Lincoln, and we hope to bring back the history of artists like, Jerry Seinfeld or Pat Benatar, great national artists coming to Lincoln. So.
With that, we just ask for approval of the change of zone and the special permit, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions?
I do have one. This outside area, so is it just basically for people to go outside and smoke with the smoking regulations?
In the past, it was used as a beer garden. As Brian mentioned, it's within 100 feet of a house, and so we've left that off our application. And so in the future, it will only be used for smoking.
Okay.
Could you describe for us a little bit when you became aware of the limitations and what have you of the particular site?
Yeah, I think we put our liquor license application in the end of December. And
Okay.
I think we found out fairly early on from police investigator Hofer, who mentioned there might be an issue, but said he wasn't sure how that would go. And we found out kind of mid to late, I think around the 18th of January, so that there was an issue with the zoning. And so immediately upon hearing that, we wanted to get the process started, since it, holds up the liquor license, basically.
Sure.
So,
And when did you lease the property?
I believe the lease was commenced on the 3rd of January.
Okay.
Other questions? Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have other testimony and support for both of these related items that's before us? Testimony and support. Is there any testimony in opposition of these related items? Testimony in opposition. Yeah, please come forward.
My name's Paul Veras. I live at 225 West Saunders, right next to the proposed zoning change, and you can see it on the map.
Can you
Not-
maybe point it out on the map? Give it a moment to come up, though, please.
Yes. I'm not really an opponent. I'm just a concerned neighborhood, property owner. I own this property right here, which is right next door, on the same block. I've lived there for 5 years. 10 years previous to that, I rented over here. So I've been in the neighborhood. I don't have an issue with the liquor license, and I don't have I don't really know Eli or the Gelsmans. I've met Eli momentarily. Seems very sincere and a nice guy. I'm just concerned about the property being changed to commercial, how that will affect my property, the property taxes and/or the valuation of it, should I eventually decide to sell or whatnot. That's all. I just basically looking for information. Like I said, I'm not trying to stop anything here. I'm just, wondering how this zoning change is going to affect me. Since you're right, it's probably been this way a long time. You went back to earlier. There used to be a gate right here. There is no longer a gate there off the street. It was boarded up last year. Also, originally, I don't remember it, but there was a house right here, because there is a curb cut right here. But obviously that house has been gone for 30 or 40 years. The previous owner told me about it. That's the only reason I know about it. But since that came up, I thought I would clarify that just a little bit. I don't know if you have any questions for me or
But during the
anything.
time that you've lived there, has this facility been in operation at all?
It was the Royal Grove, the original Royal Grove, when I lived across the street. Then it was Uncle Ron's for quite a while, year and a half, 2 years maybe. It closed again. It tried to reopen as the Royal Grove again, which made a really pathetic attempt. I mean, it did not last at all. And yes, it has been closed for about 4 years now. Trying to open again. They have been in operation since late January. I don't have any issues. I can see where the neighbors say there's a little bit of noise, but you got to put up with that. You live next to a place like this. I don't have an issue with that.
So you were aware of that when you bought this property?
Of course, yes. So that's why I'm not really concerned about that. I'm not concerned about the alcohol permit because they're not asking to serve alcohol outside, sorry, outside the premises of the building, so.
I think you're in a unique position, and I should have asked the applicant this. From what I remember of the Royal Grove, if you couldn't park in that lot, you walk down the alley to the other lot.
Yes, there is another, it's actually on the other side over here. There is
Yeah.
another parking area, which is
But-
relatively good size. And there's only been once since they have reopened that there were a long line of cars on the street. But generally, they're only open, from about 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. The other thing is there are signs along this street, at least along part of it, that there is no parking from 8 p.m. until 6 a.m. in the morning. So if the police really wanted to take care of those cars, I've only seen them do it once or twice in the last 15 years, where they've actually ticketed cars there.
I was more concerned about the noise from people walking from the venue to that remote parking place, and since you're on that alley there, if that bothered your property at all. And I don't know if you've really experienced that in the
Not
last
really.
5 years.
Occasionally you'll find a beer can over the fence or something. The only time you run into a noise or something is, say, somebody's got a loud vehicle or motorcycle or something at closing time, 2 a.m., somebody's gonna, rev it up before they leave. But, you gotta expect a little bit of that too. So I live next to. The only other thing I'm really concerned about is if this all gets turned into a commercial property, since it actually has been up for sale or lease, if it were sold, the chances that something else could move in there that, would be less desirable than this. 24 hours something or other, something that would have loitering people. That's the only thing that really concerns me.
Other questions?
Did you have any problems or concerns when you rented across the street with?
Not really,
Okay.
no.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. Is there any other testimony in opposition? Okay, do we have staff questions?
Yes. Sure.
Yeah.
I don't think I really have any for
Oh.
Brian.
To
Mine's
the
not for
gentleman's
applicant.
point,
Sounds like Chris.
Brian, to the gentleman's point about if it was changed to other type of commercial use, in this case, that's a parking lot, and it can only be a parking lot, and anything else would have to go through this body as well as, city council as well.
Excuse me, correct, yeah, that's the point of the zoning agreement, is that use can't change without city approval, planning commission, city council changing that. Otherwise, it's a parking lot, and it's gonna remain that.
So really, the only effect on his property would be kind of the same conditions that were in effect 5 years ago when he took ownership.
Exactly, and that was really the strategy here, the point of it is that's been the historic land use here. Really, the effect of this is just allows that to continue on. Doesn't allow it to change. Now, the building to the south, yeah, if the nightclub goes away, could a furniture retailer come? Yeah. Still can only use the north part as a parking lot. But, so that use could change, although I think on the scale, this kind of use is probably one of the more intense ones that you'd come up with. So anything else is probably going to be deemed to likely be less intense, so.
But that was always the case.
That was always the case. That's Yeah.
Nothing, no change.
No change here in that regard, correct.
Well, that was my question. I just wanted you to clarify that the south end of the property will always have the same flexibility that it's had.
Yep, correct.
Brian, do you think that planning, if the current applicant was not before us, but rather the landlord were before us to seek this zoning change, and there was no pressure of an operating business in place here, do you think planning's recommendation would be the same?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I think we look at it the same way.
Okay.
Here again, it's because of the fact there's a historic land use, the history of this property. There's land use here that has a history going back to the late 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
So what's being proposed here represents no surprises. So I think that's the case.
Okay. Just because, the reason I asked was, I don't want to hang up our approval in this in Eli's reputation, which is very good, which is excellent. But the fact of the matter is that should this move on, and someday it probably will,
Yep.
Another bar user can go in here right directly afterwards, and there has been a reputation in years past of maybe this not being a great neighbor, but I had a neighbor speak, and maybe I'm wrong. So thank you very much. I
Yep.
appreciate it.
Well, I guess let me add to that. I think we make a point of, I think what the planning department's response would be, typically, it doesn't matter who's applying for it. We're looking at this from the standpoint of land use, compatibility, appropriateness to the neighborhood. It really doesn't matter who the applicant is and what they're representing to do and how they're going to do it. The fact is, in most cases, you change the zoning, that's done.
No, and I wasn't suggesting that planning was making that. I was,
Right.
but I do think there are members of the greater Lincoln community that feel like this change is important because of an existing business.
Okay, yep.
Brian, I did have a question for you. I noticed when I was reviewing this property that on the east side there, right off of Cornhusker Highway, that the access is city-owned. Is there a reason for that?
I don't know. It appears to be right-of-way.
Okay.
And so,
For the alley to have access to Cornhusker.
yeah, I think that's what it is. How that came to be, how that condition came to be, I don't know.
Anything else for Brian? Thanks, Brian. Applicant rebuttal?
I don't think we really have any rebuttal unless you have other questions. As to Paul's question about his taxes, it would only be speculation on our part as to whether this would affect it, but since he's outside of the change of zone, I doubt if it's going to have an effect. And I think appreciated Brian's remarks about this would be recommended for approval regardless of the applicant. We'd like to point out that we kind of think of this as economic development for this area. This has laid fallow for 4 years, and it's a sort of a special purpose type of property that we think will be put to very good use. So with that, unless you have a question.
I do have a question. Do you guys plan on using that parking that's a little bit off to the east side there? I think according to what I read, you have enough parking for the requirements, but I didn't know if you're going to still utilize that, because I know it's the same owner.
I'm going to defer that to Eli.
We would like to avoid using it whenever possible. There have been a couple events where I think it's preferable to use the lot rather than street parking. But that's something where from what I understand, the use of that other lot is a little bit of a gray area. And so I think we're looking for a little bit of guidance in that as to what we should do with the extra lot and the overflow parking.
Was that part of your lease?
It is. It does include it. Yep.
I don't think it'll change my decision any. I was just curious.
Okay?
Thank
Any
you.
other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll need to call these separately. Okay, this will be for change of zone number 18003 from R2 Residential District to H3 Highway Commercial District on property generally located at 340 West Cornhusker Highway. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval.
So move, Finnegan.
Second, Core.
Discussion?
I understand, I think it makes sense to do this. I would say that in the staff report where it says that the future land use in the comp plan, was urban residential, and even though parking lots work, I would say that this probably isn't completely compatible with the comprehensive plan, because we know we're gonna make this change to be a parking lot. And so we're taking it off of the books as residential in the future.
Anyone else?
When I look at this, we have similar situations throughout the city in different places. And primarily what comes to mind is the College View area where we have the front along 48th Street zoned commercial and the back then is residential. And where we look at the greater blocks and, you know, both sides are commercial, I think it makes sense to go ahead and do that for this, and then we just have a little space remaining. And I'm not a big proponent of spot zoning, but where this has been there for more than 50 years, it doesn't really change the use. And I really like that we're having that zoning agreement to protect it and keep it as a parking lot. That's a very important piece for me.
Anyone else? Tom?
The only hesitation that I have on this is I think that we are creeping closer to an H3 zoning on this parking lot, even with the use restriction in place. After this is said and done and this user's gone or this building's gone, I don't know that it's a huge jump for an applicant to come in here and say, well, how about H3 on the entire parcel with no restrictions whatsoever? Then I think that we do have encroachment into the existing neighborhood. That's the only hesitation that I have about this. I wish that we had more flexibility in terms of having R2 zoning and having not to change this zone to allow an alcohol use here. But unfortunately, we don't.
That's right.
Anyone else? Yeah, I think this is a good use, a good change to put in place. Again, I've said this before, but I don't like to see buildings in our city dark, and if this helps us alleviate that, I think this is a good thing. So I think we're ready to call a roll.
Okay, this is for the conditional approval of changes zone 18003. Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear.
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0. The associated special permit 18007 is to allow for the sale of alcohol for consumption on the premises on property generally located at 340 West Cornhusker Highway. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval. Again, this is final action by the Planning Commission unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days.
So move, Finnegan.
Second, Core.
Any other discussion? We cover it in the first motion?
Okay,
I just look forward to seeing some good shows.
Okay, call the roll.
Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear.
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0. Next item is item 4.2, a special permit 18002 for the development of 22 dwelling units, including waivers to zoning and subdivision requirements on property generally located at 1125 West A Street. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval. This is final action by the Planning Commission unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
I see none. Desi.
Thank you, Commissioners, and good afternoon. Desi Redmond, Planning Department. So this is a request for a community unit plan, a CUP, It is located at the intersection of West A and Highway 77, so in this southwest quadrant here. The property, when and if developed, would be accessed off of West Washington Street. I'm going to try to zoom out here a little bit. There we go. So the proposal is for 22 units, includes 3 outlots, 2 of which are for drainage, and 1 would be deeded to Lot 1 of Block 3 in the future when Phase 2 is developed. So you can see that there is similar residential development just to the west here, and also if you hop over on the other side of Highway 77, there's similar residential development as well. So the comp plan does identify this property as future urban density residential uses, so the request is in compliance with our comp plan. The applicant has requested some waivers with this proposal, and staff is agreeable to those waivers due to some of the constraints on the property as far as it's a smaller site and also limited potential for alternative lot layout. The applicant is here with us. They'll probably touch on, why they're requesting those waivers. But if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to take them.
I have one. So on those developments that you mentioned that are very similar, kind of off to the west there, do they have the same kind of setbacks and waivers that we're looking at on this one?
No, those are just straight zoning, and so there's not a CUP, and they generally speaking, they do meet the existing setbacks. There may be some properties in there that potentially a garage or something doesn't, but otherwise it is just straight zoning.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is the access off West A then eliminated?
So if you look at the site plan, so this is Phase 2 here. So once Phase 2 would be developed, there is a note on the site plan that states that they would relinquish access off of West A. And so the only access would be West Washington Street. And then once this portion would be developed, that would be able to access there as well.
I thought I read the note, and I could have read it incorrectly, that the church was going to keep access?
Right, until Phase 2 is developed. Yeah,
So they weren't going to keep it forever?
Right,
Okay.
yeah, so they would be able to maintain their access because they currently have access. Yes, yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
All right.
And there was something about unassigned dwelling units. Is that associated with the church property?
Yes, so there are, what was requested by the applicant is 22 total units. 20 of them are for attached or detached single family, and the 2 unassigned would potentially be for 2-family where the church would be located at.
Got it.
The other thing that caught my eye, so it looks like Public Works had some problems with water detention and that kind of stuff. Has that been resolved?
Yes,
It was a little
ma'am.
unclear.
Yep, we've met with the applicant and Watershed, and they require these, the outlot for drainage here on Phase 1. That's in our codes, what they require, and we've met with the applicant and Watershed, and we've ironed out those issues. And so there's also a condition of approval that Watershed has to review the final plans one last time and agree with, what they're proposing.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have testimony from the applicant?
Hi, I'm Marcia Kenning with Riga Engineering on behalf of Scott Anderson, the developer. This thing work?
There you go.
Okay. This is a little bit big. So Dusty kind of touched on a few things with the waivers. I'm not quite sure which waivers you guys all want to talk about, but they're listed. The minimum lot depth, that's something along the highway that usually it is required to have the lot depth at 110. And we, with this small of site and trying to get the drainage where we need it to be, we just can't meet that depth. So that's why we're asking for that one. Pedestrian way, I think that was a one that planning has said that we really don't need to even ask for, since we do have the highway and West A and development along the west side. There really isn't any way to put another sidewalk through. And then the lot width to depth ratio, that one's, we've kind of, since we've had to put in some outlots for drainage along here as well as in the back of the lots on phase 2, we don't need that waiver either. So I think there's a motion to amend that you've all received also, so that one's taken care of. The front, side, and rear yard setbacks, because it is a kind of a tight site, we kind of need a little bit more room just to get a structure that can actually be sold on the lots. So that's why we're kind of asking for just a little bit of area in the side and the front and the rear yards. And then the lot area themselves, it's kind of the same thing. We need to be able to get the structure on those lots, and we have a little tight sites, so.
Can you tell me a little bit about the timing of the extension of the roadways? Like, will that happen before, as you're in the beginning, or?
Yes. The West Washington Street as well as Southwest 11th, those would be construction as soon as possible.
Forward.
Yeah. To create these lots on the sides. However, for phase 2, that's still going to be owned by the church, and the church is going to still operate as a church. So that area isn't going to be disturbed at this time. That's why we're still going to want to have the access until they decide to do something different.
And the
then-
eventual connection with West Garfield will also happen at some point in the future?
Well, yeah, and that is just conceptual.
Okay.
That, the proper, or the developer
Understood.
doesn't have any
Connection
say
to that
really over
property.
that. Yeah.
Right.
It's just to kind of show that it would work.
Got it.
There are going to be sidewalks, though, up and down 11th Street in front of the houses, or?
Yeah, it'll be a standard public street.
Other questions? Sandra?
I'm looking at phase 2.
Sure.
And then I have a question about one of the waivers, but I'm looking at phase 2, and I'm working the unnamed or unassigned lots. So
Sure.
I understand the outlots, but when phase 2 is developed, will there be 4 lots sold or 3 lots sold?
Phase 2,
Okay.
we're kind of looking at that as when the church wants to redo, that church will probably be taken down. It'll be moved off. It won't be a church anymore. It'll be gone.
Oh, I see.
So we're kind of having those 2 unassigned units just in case whoever purchases that second phase in the future can divide it up however they want. Right now, we have them shown as single family.
Okay.
But with those 2 extra units, then they could do single family attached. They would have to go through another process to do that, though.
All right, I see. Thank you. I was assuming the church would be there.
Still there.
Still there into the future, so I was.
Right.
And then on the waivers, So you walked through most of the waivers, and it looks like the waivers that you're still asking for are A, D, E, F, and G.
Correct.
And have you resolved all of the issues that Public Works has brought before you, and most especially the water?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. What we had to do, and I don't know what you have in front of you, what was in their packet, but these lots were 95 feet deep, and we had to change them to 90. And then we also have all the access that they wanted for those drainage ways. We've kind of worked that out with Public Works also, so.
Yeah, I saw the steepness of the swale and thought, well, that's a shame they're so steep on both sides. It would make a really interesting bobsled run.
It might look really steep, but it really isn't. It's a 4-to-1 slope.
Someone's been watching the Olympics.
Of being a luge runner myself, so.
Yeah, it's a 4-to-1, so
Okay.
that's really, actually really nice to mow on and everything. It's not, it's pretty nice, so.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Do we have testimony in support of this item? Do we have testimony in opposition to this item? Do we have additional staff questions?
I have one, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
I noticed Building and Safety talked about a shed violating the front yard setback, and is this a shed tied to the church? Is this a shed? I was a little confused where the shed was at.
Yeah, and I think, let me and so, right now, it's not in violation. It would be, they were, when phase 2 got developed. And give me a second, I gotta.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm wondering.
First, I thought they meant the property here.
Yeah.
Okay, so the shed is right
Okay.
there, and so once the phase 2 would get developed, that shed, because the church would be going away, that shed would also be going away, and so no, that's not right. Oh, okay, thank you.
Sorry. Since the street is going to be constructed, that shed does need to be removed when the street is
For
constructed.
phase 1, yeah.
Yeah, and the church realizes that and agrees with that too, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Other questions? Staff questions? Okay, thank you. Do we have applicant rebuttal? Or was that was applicant rebuttal? Okay. I think we are ready to entertain a motion.
Move approval, Hove.
Second, Washington.
Would this be as amended?
As amended.
Yes, I was going to ask.
As
Thank you.
amended by,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Discussion.
I usually hate to see all these waivers, but with this site, it's kind of appropriate because it's limited by so many things on both sides. So even though we've got the waivers, if you want to call it the front or the back side yard there, along Highway 77 and then kind of the backyard on the other side, they'll still have green space. And so that for me works. So I'm going to support this application.
Anyone else?
I'm going to support it. It's a good usage of land in a tight area and fits with the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, it is. It's a tight site, and I think it's, for what we're trying to accomplish here, it's good. So I'm going to support it too. Please call the roll.
Okay, this would be for conditional approval of special permit 18002 as amended, as identified in the March 13th memorandum from staff. Okay, Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear.
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0. Okay, I would just note that item 5.1, which is county preliminary plat number 18001, has been deferred to the March 28th hearing.
So at this time, anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda may do so. I see none, so we are adjourned.